There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, one that feared God and turned away from evil. Job 1 verse 1. He was a man both great in substance and pure in spirit. His herds covered the plains as clouds of wool. His camels crossed the deserts in long caravans, and the sound of his oxen at the plow was as the heartbeat of the earth. His servants were many, his storehouses full, and yet his heart was humble before the Lord. The blessing of the Lord, it maketh rich, and he addeth no sorrow with it. Proverbs 10 verse 22. Job was a man of peace. His words were slow and measured, and his eyes were gentle yet full of understanding. When he sat among the elders, men grew silent that they might hear his counsel. The young men hid themselves for awe, and the aged stood when he approached. Unto me men gave ear and waited and kept silence at my counsel. Job 29 verse 21. His sons and his daughters were as the olive plants round about his table. 7 sons strong and steadfast, 3 daughters graceful as lilies in the field. They rejoiced together often, for their hearts were knit in love. Each in his appointed day held a feast in his house, and they sent for their sisters to eat and drink with them. The air around their feasts was full of music and laughter, and even the servants smiled, for there was joy in the house of Job. Yet Job, being a man of deep reverence, rose early after every feast, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of his children. He said, It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually, for the love of his children was bound to the fear of his God. Job 1 verse 5. He judged the poor in righteousness. The stranger who came hungry to his gate was not turned away. I was eyes to the blind, and feet was I to the lame. I was a father to the poor, and the cause which I knew not I searched out. Job 29 verses 15 to 16. His wife, Dinah, a woman of tender wisdom, ruled the household with quiet dignity. Her speech was soft, and her eyes shone with the peace of a heart content in God. Together they walked in unity, neither lifted up by pride nor brought low by fear. When the sun set upon the land of Uz, Job would sit beneath the fig tree before his house. The flocks lay in their folds, the servants rested, and a cool wind whispered through the fields. Then Job lifted his eyes toward heaven and said, O Lord, thou art my portion and the lot of my inheritance. Thou maintainest my lot. The lines are fallen unto me in pleasant places. Yea, I have a goodly heritage. Psalm 16 verses 5 to 6. He looked upon his children as a man gazes upon a garden watered by grace. His barns were filled, yet his soul found rest not in the grain but in the giver. And he said in his heart, Though the Lord prosper me, yet will I not forget that all flesh is as grass. For Job knew the frailty of man and the mystery of life. He said, Man that is born of a woman is of few days, and full of trouble. He cometh forth like a flower, and is cut down. He fleeth also as a shadow, and continueth not. Job 14 verses 1 to 2. But he feared not death, for his heart was fixed upon the Almighty. In his meditations he often spoke thus, I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. Job 19 verse 25. And the Lord looked down from heaven and was pleased with his servant Job, for he was righteous in deed, in word, and in thought. Yet unseen to the eyes of men, there was another counsel in the heavens. The sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and the adversary also came among them. And the Lord said unto him, From whence comest thou? And he answered, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. Job 1 verse 7. Then said the Lord, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and turneth away from evil? And the adversary answered, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast thou not made a hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. Job 1 verses 8 to 11. And the Lord said unto the adversary, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power, only upon himself put not forth thine hand. Job 1 verse 12. So the adversary departed from the presence of the Lord. And there was silence in heaven. The angels who stood by trembled, for they knew that the storm of testing had been loosed upon the earth. But on earth, the stars still shone over Uz. The air was calm, the sheep slept in their folds, and Job's house glowed with the light of peace. That night Job sat beside the fire with Dinah his wife. The sound of the wind passed softly through the palm branches, and the smell of frankincense lingered in the air. Dinah said, "My lord, thou art troubled in spirit. What shadow is this that crosses thy brow while all about us is blessed?" And Job answered, "A man must remember the Lord in joy, lest he forget him in sorrow. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job 1 verse 21. And she pondered his words, and her heart was quiet. The moon rose high over the hills, and the desert shone like silver. Job looked upon his flocks, his children, his fields, and his home, and he gave thanks. Yet beyond the veil of that tranquil night, the powers of heaven watched, and the hand of trial prepared itself. For the peace of Job was but the stillness before the thunder, the calm that God gives to those whose faith he will soon refine as gold. When the time of harvest came, the earth was peaceful and full of fruit. Then the heavens opened, and the sons of God came before the Lord. Among them came the adversary, the accuser, who once had glory, but now carried darkness in his face. The Lord said, "Where have you come from?" The adversary answered, "I have been walking to and fro on the earth." Then the Lord said, "Have you seen my servant Job? There is no one like him on earth. He is good, honest, and faithful. He still keeps his integrity, even though you made me let trouble come upon him without reason." The adversary replied, "Skin for skin. A man will give anything to save his life. But if you touch his body, he will curse you to your face." The Lord said, "Very well. He is in your hand, but do not take his life." So the adversary left the presence of the Lord, and his shadow fell upon the earth. One day, Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking in their oldest brother's house. Job was sitting under a tree, praying and giving thanks for his children. Suddenly a servant came running. "The oxen were plowing," he cried, "and the donkeys were feeding beside them." The Sabaeans attacked, killed the servants, and took the animals away. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. Before he finished speaking, another servant came. "The fire of God fell from heaven," he said, "and burned up the sheep and the servants. I alone escaped to tell you." A third came running. "The Chaldeans formed 3 groups," he said, "and stole the camels. They killed the servants, and I alone escaped to tell you." Before that man finished, a fourth came, his face pale. "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking in their oldest brother's house," he said. "A great wind came from the desert and struck the house. It fell on them and they are dead." Then Job stood up, tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell to the ground to worship. He said, "I came from my mother's womb with nothing, and I will leave with nothing. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In all this, Job did not sin or blame God. After many silent days, the adversary came again before the Lord. The Lord said, "Have you seen my servant Job? He still keeps his integrity, though you made me let harm come upon him." The adversary answered, "Touch his flesh and bone, and he will curse you." The Lord said,
"He is in your hand,
but spare his life." So the adversary left and struck Job with painful sores from his feet to his head. Job took a broken piece of pottery and sat among the ashes outside the city, scraping his skin. People passed by and were shocked. Once he was honored, now he sat in misery. Job's wife said to him, "Do you still keep your faith? Curse God and die." But Job said, "You speak like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Still, Job did not sin with his lips. 3 friends heard of his suffering: Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. They came to comfort him. When they saw him from far away, they did not recognize him. They wept, tore their clothes, and sprinkled dust on their heads. They sat with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights. No one spoke, for they saw his grief was very great. At night, Job looked up to heaven and whispered, "Even if he kills me, yet will I trust in him." And he wept, for even the strongest man must weep. Thus ended the days of Job's happiness, and began the testing of his faith, faith that would shine brighter than gold. Blessed is the one who still worships when life is silent. Faith that never suffers is not yet proven. God allows the storm not to destroy us, but to show what our foundation is made of. Just as gold is purified by fire, so the soul is made pure by pain. The one who suffers quietly in trust speaks more loudly than 1,000 prayers. And after 7 days had passed, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. He lifted his eyes unto the heavens, his voice trembling as the wind over dry reeds, and said, "Let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, There is a man-child conceived. Let that day be darkness. Let not God regard it from above, neither let the light shine upon it." Job 3 verses 3 to 4. And the men that sat with him wept, for the cry of Job was like the cry of the earth beneath the storm. He stretched his hands toward heaven and cried, "Why is light given to him that is in misery, and life unto the bitter in soul, which long for death, but it cometh not?" Job 3 verses 20 to 21. Then Eliphaz the Temanite, oldest and wisest among them, arose, his beard gray and his eyes deep with understanding. He spoke softly, yet his words were sharp as the edge of a blade. "Remember, I pray thee, who ever perished, being innocent? Or where were the righteous cut off? Even as I have seen, they that plow iniquity and sow wickedness reap the same." Job 4 verses 7 to 8. Job bowed his head, and tears ran down his cheeks, falling upon the dust. He answered, "I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are ye all." Job 16 verse 2. "If I have sinned, what shall I do unto thee, O thou preserver of men? Why hast thou set me as a mark against thee?" Job 7 verse 20. And Eliphaz told a vision he had seen in the night. "Fear came upon me, and trembling which made all my bones to shake. Then a spirit passed before my face. The hair of my flesh stood up. It stood still, but I could not discern the form thereof. There was silence, and I heard a voice saying, Shall mortal man be more just than God?" Job 4 verses 14 to 17. But Job, though trembling, answered, "Teach me, and I will hold my tongue, and cause me to understand wherein I have erred. Behold, he breaketh me with a tempest, and multiplieth my wounds without cause." Job 6 verses 24 to 25, 9:17. And he cried into the night, "I will say unto God, Do not condemn me. Show me wherefore thou contendest with me." Job 10 verse 2. Then Bildad the Shuhite spoke, younger but stern, saying, "Doth God pervert judgment? Or doth the Almighty pervert justice? If thy children have sinned against him, and he have cast them away for their transgression, if thou wouldest seek unto God betimes, he would make thy habitation prosperous again." Job 8 verses 3 to 6. But Job lifted his weary eyes, and his voice trembled. "How should man be just with God? If he will contend with him, he cannot answer him 1 of 1,000. He removeth mountains, and they know not. He overturneth them in his anger." Job 9 verses 2 to 5. And he whispered into the ashes, "Though I were perfect, yet would I not know my soul. I would despise my life." Job 9 verse 21. The wind blew across the plain, and even the friends were silent for a moment, for the pain in his words was greater than their wisdom. Then Zophar the Naramathite spoke, youngest but proud, saying, "Should thy lies make men hold their peace? And when thou mockest, shall no man make thee ashamed? Know therefore that God exacteth of thee less than thine iniquity deserveth." Job 11 verses 3 and 6. And Job looked upon him long, with sorrow rather than anger. He said, "No doubt but ye are the people, and wisdom shall die with you. But I have understanding as well as you. I am not inferior to you." Job 12 verses 2 to 3. Then Job's voice rose with power. "Ask now the beasts, and they shall teach thee, and the fowls of the air, and they shall tell thee. Who knoweth not in all these that the hand of the Lord hath wrought this?" Job 12 verses 7 to 9. And the others fell silent. For though Job was broken in body, the light of truth burned in his words. Then Job lifted his face to heaven and spoke alone to the unseen. Behold, he taketh away, who can hinder him? Who will say unto him, What doest thou? Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him, but I will maintain mine own ways before him. Job 9:12, 13:15. The stars shone cold above, and the wind answered not. No voice came from heaven. Job covered his head with ashes and waited through days and nights, through fever and pain, through silence and tears. His friends whispered among themselves, but Job heard them not. His heart was fixed upon the silence of God, which is deeper than all human wisdom. Faith is not the absence of questions, but the courage to ask them in the dark. There are nights when heaven is silent, yet the silence is not rejection but testing. Words of comfort without compassion become wounds. True wisdom listens more than it explains. He who wrestles with God in the ashes finds that pain can be a form of prayer. And after the silence of 7 nights, Eliphaz spoke again, saying, If thou return to the Almighty, thou shalt be built up, thou shalt put away iniquity far from thy tabernacles. Then shalt thou lay up gold as dust, and the Almighty shall be thy defense. Job 22 verses 23 to 25. But Job answered him with trembling hands and weary voice. Even today is my complaint bitter. My stroke is heavier than my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his seat. Job 23 verses 2 to 3. Behold, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left hand, where he doth work, but I cannot behold him. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. Job 23 verses 8 to 10. And the friends were silent, for in his words there was a fire not of man, but of faith born of pain. Then Eliphaz rose and said, Is not thy wickedness great? For thou hast taken a pledge from thy brother for naught, and stripped the naked of their clothing. Thou hast not given water to the weary to drink, and thou hast withholden bread from the hungry. Job 22 verses 5 to 7. But Job lifted his head slowly and said, The poor that cried I delivered, and the fatherless and him that had none to help him. I was eyes to the blind, and feet was I to the lame. Job 29 verses 12 and 15. And when he had spoken thus, a tear fell from his eye, and the dust clung to his beard. For he remembered his former days of mercy, and his heart broke within him. Then Bildad answered and said, Dominion and fear are with him. He mocketh peace in his high places. How then can man be justified with God? Or how can he be clean that is born of a woman? Job 25 verses 2 and 4. And Job replied, I have heard of his majesty, but I also have seen his silence. He stretcheth out the north over the empty place, and hangeth the earth upon nothing. Job 26 verse 7. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at his reproof. By his spirit he hath garnished the heavens. His hand hath formed the crooked serpent. Lo, these are parts of his ways, but how little a portion is heard of him. Job 26 verses 11 to 14. And the words of Job were like thunder over the plain, for he spoke of mysteries that even his friends could not answer. Then Zophar the Naramathite rose up in wrath, saying, Therefore do my thoughts cause me to answer, and for this I make haste. Knowest thou not this of old, since man was placed upon earth, that the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the hypocrite but for a moment? Job 20:2, 4, 5. But Job lifted his eyes, full of anguish yet unmoved, and said, Wherefore do the wicked live, become old, yea, are mighty in power? Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. Job 21 verses 7 and 9. How oft is the candle of the wicked put out? God distributeth sorrows in his anger, but many die in their strength, being wholly at ease and quiet. Job 21 verses 17 and 23. And Zophar's lips fell silent, for truth had silenced accusation. Then Job sat again upon the ashes, his body weak and trembling, yet his spirit awake. He said, Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. Job 28 verse 28. Man knoweth not the price thereof, neither is it found in the land of the living. The depth saith, it is not in me, and the sea saith, it is not with me. It cannot be gotten for gold, neither shall silver be weighed for the price thereof. Job 28 verses 13 to 15. And his voice softened like the wind before dawn. Oh, that I were as in months past, as in the days when God preserved me, when his candle shined upon my head, and when by his light I walked through darkness. Job 29 verses 2 to 3. Then he fell silent. The night wind carried his sighs over the desert, and the stars looked down as silent witnesses to his endurance. Wisdom born of pain is purer than knowledge born of comfort. The words of friends may wound, but truth spoken in anguish reaches heaven. Man's understanding ends where God's silence begins. He who endures in faith becomes the mirror of divine mystery. And it came to pass after the words of Job had ceased, that the wind began to stir from the desert. The heavens darkened with cloud, and the breath of the Almighty moved over the land. Lightning flashed across the horizon, and the earth trembled. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind, and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Job 38 verses 1 to 3. And Job, frail and trembling, fell upon his face in the dust. He heard the storm roll like thunder across the plain, and the voice of the Lord was as the sound of many waters. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Job 38 verses 4 to 7. The clouds broke, and rays of divine fire filled the sky. The friends of Job fell on their faces, unable to speak. The wind circled around Job like living breath, lifting the ashes and scattering them into the light. Hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the dawn to know his place? Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea? Or hast thou walked in the search of the depth? Where is the way where light dwelleth? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof? Job 38 verses 12 and 16, 19. And Job saw with his spirit the wonders of creation, the stars blazing in harmony, the sea roaring at its appointed bounds, the eagle soaring on the wind of heaven. The voice continued, Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? Canst thou lift up thy voice to the clouds, that abundance of waters may cover thee? Job 38 verses 33 to 34. And the Lord said unto Job, Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eateth grass as an ox. Lo now, his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. Job 40 verses 15 to 17. And before the eyes of Job appeared the shadow of a great beast by the river, its body vast as a hill, breathing mist upon the reeds. Then came another vision, a creature from the depths, whose scales were as shields of brass, and whose breath kindled fire upon the waters. Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook? Or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Job 41 verses 1 and 19. And Job beheld the power and majesty of the Creator in all things, in storm, in silence, in beast, in man. Then Job fell to the ground and covered his face, saying, Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? I will lay mine hand upon my mouth. Once have I spoken, but I will not answer. Yea, twice, but I will proceed no further. Job 40 verses 4 to 5. And again he said, I know that thou canst do everything, and that no thought can be withholden from thee. I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth thee. Wherefore I abhor myself, and repent in dust and ashes. Job 42:2, 5, 6. And as he spoke, the wind ceased, and the silence returned. But it was not the silence of absence. It was the stillness of peace, the rest of understanding. The clouds parted, and sunlight fell upon Job's bowed head. The Lord looked upon his servant and was pleased, for the furnace of suffering had refined his faith like pure gold. The voice of God is not always gentle. Sometimes it comes in thunder to awaken the heart. Wisdom begins when man realizes his smallness. Nature itself is a scroll of revelation, every storm a sermon of his majesty. True repentance is not born of fear but of awe, the recognition of holiness. The God who speaks from the whirlwind is the same who whispers peace to the soul that endures. When all voices fall silent, the heart that still trusts has spoken the loudest. And it came to pass, when the Lord had spoken unto Job out of the whirlwind, that the storm ceased and the air grew clear as crystal. The light of heaven spread across the land of Uz, and the fragrance of rain rose from the dust. Then the Lord said unto Eliphaz the Temanite, My wrath is kindled against thee, and against thy two friends, for ye have not spoken of me the thing that is right, as my servant Job hath. Job 42 verse 7. Therefore take unto you now 7 bullocks and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering, and my servant Job shall pray for you, for him will I accept. Job 42 verse 8. And Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar bowed low, ashamed, for their wisdom had failed them. They brought the offerings, and came unto Job. When they beheld him, still sitting among the ashes but radiant with peace, they wept and fell upon their faces. And Job prayed for his friends. His voice was soft, and his heart free of bitterness. And the Lord accepted Job's prayer. Then the Lord turned the captivity of Job, when he prayed for his friends. Also the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Job 42 verse 10. And all his brethren, and all his sisters, and all they that had been of his acquaintance before, came unto him, and did eat bread with him in his house. They comforted him over all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. Every one also gave him a piece of silver, and an earring of gold. Job 42 verse 11. Then Job rose from the ashes. His skin, once torn by sores, was made whole like the flesh of a child. His beard shone silver in the sun, and his eyes, though they had wept much, were bright with peace. His house was rebuilt, his flocks multiplied, his vineyard stretched again over the plain. 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 she-asses were his. Job 42 verse 12. Children once again filled his courtyard with laughter. He called the eldest Jemimah, the second Keziah, and the third Karen-Happuch, for beauty was found again in the tents of Uz. Job 42 verse 14. And there were no women found so fair as the daughters of Job in all the land, and their father gave them inheritance among their brethren. Job 42 verse 15. And Job lived after this 140 years, and saw his sons and his sons' sons, even 4 generations. Job 42 verse 16. In the evening of his days, he sat often beneath the same terebinth tree where once he had wept. The wind was gentle now, the sky filled with golden light. He would watch the flocks move like clouds across the plain, and the laughter of his children would echo like music. Sometimes he would look eastward, to where the storm had once come, and whisper, I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth thee. Job 42 verse 5. And peace, deep and eternal, dwelt upon him. He died, being old and full of days. Job 42 verse 17. Thus ended the story of Job, the man of Uz, tested by heaven, restored by grace. He learned that faith is not the absence of suffering, but the endurance through it. That silence can be the speech of God, and pain the birth of wisdom. That every wound may become a window through which light enters the soul. And so the dust became his altar, the tears his baptism, and the storm his teacher. And from the ashes, faith rose, not broken but purified. Blessed is the one who can praise even after losing all. God's silence is not his absence, but his waiting for the soul to mature. Forgiveness brings restoration faster than anger. And when man bows low in the dust, heaven bends low to lift him. Faith is not proven by words, but by wounds that still worship. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. Folded hands. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more amazing stories and insights. Your support means the world to me. Globe showing Europe, Africa. Also, remember to like, share, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks again for being part of this journey. Together we're building something truly special. See you in the next video.